episode of Memento Mori Monday is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you. Words cannot describe how much I've always wanted to say that on film. PBS for life. Hello, everyone. My name is Emmy. Welcome to Memento Mori Monday, or welcome back to Memento Mori Monday. If you are new here, I am a death doula. I use this series to answer y'all's most asked questions, to talk about history, talk about debunking preconceived notions about death dying. I do want to include a little disclaimer. I include it at the bottom now because a lot of y'all already know I am a death doula. That does not make me your death doula. So please do operate with your own discretion, do what is best for you. And if you do want to work with me, you have to contact me directly to see whether or not we'll be a fit. We are going to be talking about something that we have broached already, which is fun to be able to go broad, and now we're going a little bit deeper with the topic. I want to thank my patrons for voting on this particular topic. You are still more than welcome to include your questions, ideas for future videos, either in the comments or by emailing me. But for the most sway, you can become a patron of my Patreon. Even at the lowest tier, we'll get you voting power. $3 per month ain't bad. It is sad that is now less than coffee and matcha in most places. But that's a different problem that we don't have time to get into, and that's not the topic of today's video. Links to explore all of the tier options are linked below. Have you ever felt like there is grief that you weren't allowed to explore, or you can express it openly, or it didn't feel like you could really receive adequate support for it? Because if so, it may be falling into this particular grief bucket. So what is disenfranchised grief? It is a term coined by Dr. Kenneth Doka. He says that it refers to grief that isn't acknowledged or validated by society. And in some ways, it is actively being undermined. A little bit more about him in case you're curious. He is a scholar, very prolific writer, has published several books. Also an ordained Lutheran pastor, and he has an ongoing blog for Psychology Today titled Good Morning. So links to how to keep up with him in the description. A good way to unpack what is disenfranchised grief is by saying how it may present itself. It could look like the loss doesn't seem worthy of grief in some way. It could be that there's like the loss of companion animal, as I have found, like the loss of like a dog or a cat, because I have noticed lately that I am receiving more referrals. I'm getting more people working with me after they've had a pet loss. So it does feel that it is getting more and more validated. I would argue this is absolutely still a thing with less conventional pets, like pets that people are like, how could you have loved that in the first place? Like when I lost my corn snake Andromeda, I'll put her up real quick, but I'll look away if you don't like snakes. She's beautiful. I loved her. She passed away on St. Paddy's Day, which is a very awful day. It's awful to lose a pet, but it's awful to lose a pet on St. Patrick's Day because everyone is so loud and drunk, and you're there having this like visceral experience. So it was a really, really, really rough day. And I would try to talk about Andromeda passing. Some people who knew me and knew her and then what she meant to me were very, very kind and empathetic. And some people just kind of gave me that look like they'd probably forgotten that I had a snake, or they chose to forget, or they didn't know. And then they're like, oh, you're one of those people. And it's like, oh, it's for the best that your pet snake died. Well, awful. So that's a form of disenfranchised grief, because I did have kind of the full breadth of experience. I had people who were there for me. I had people who were undermining it. And I do feel that we are becoming better overall as time has gone on, but we're still not quite where we should be with talking about miscarriage or stillbirth. The griever isn't considered legitimate, or it triggers like feelings of shame or guilt. So that could be when we minimize the grief of a child. Oh, they're too young to be grieving. That does have an impact on them and invalidates their sense of grief and how they process grief. And also it does trigger for them that you might not be a safe person for them because you are undermining their experience of grief. Children have very real feelings too. And just because for us, it's like, oh, they're young, they'll get over it, we're doing a lot of damage there. It could also come down to like different dynamics, like more and more people are being out and open with being in open relationships, with being polyamorous, with having open marriages. I have noticed that if there is grief around the dissolution of a relationship or somebody breaks up with somebody in the dynamic, I have heard from some people who have come to me for grief support that they're poly and they have not gotten the support they needed in either a breakup or even witnessing like the passing of their partner, or even feeling like they couldn't be as present. They felt like they couldn't be out and open at a funeral, or that they were worried about being excluded by the family because they were always shunned. There's a lot that could be going on there that could end up facilitating that feeling of disenfranchised grief. Also, incarcerated individuals or even coworkers as well, that we are around these people all day. And even if we don't necessarily become work friends or we see each other outside of the office, there is still an impact because they were a part of our community in that regard. And now they're no longer here. To go back to the relationship not being recognized, if it's an ex-partner or a friend that maybe you fell out of touch with, or an online connection, just because there may have been changes to the dynamic where they're less a part of your life and you witnessed their passing, even though maybe you weren't as connected to them near the end. If anybody wants to invalidate that, then that's their own problem. But it can absolutely lead to disenfranchised grief if you are not aware that what is happening in the moment, like a lot of us get grief brain. We're not really able to fully internalize that how we're being treated is actually wrong. The death of an ex-spouse, estranged family member, again, there's like the grief of having to separate from them or to no longer associate with them. It can definitely foster feelings of confusion. It could be its own grief journey. And it could feel harder to reach out to people about it sometimes because maybe it feels like it's not that important, or you've been told it's not that important. Grieving someone that you've lost in a sense, maybe they haven't passed, but you are less wine with them in their lives because of addiction, incarceration, or mental illness is making it harder for you all to have the relationship that you wished you could have. So it ends up fracturing things and creating that kind of grief in the midst of it all. Death of someone in a stigmatized relationship. So that could be when like things are complicated. Maybe you're having a secret separation where it's like only between you and your partner and you're seeing somebody else and there's stuff going on with them. It may feel like you can't reach out and talk to anybody about it. Queer identities, if you're not like out and being queer in the world right now, has its own kind of like grief and this like target on our back kind of feeling. There's like a living loss, like job loss, moving away, chronic illness, disabling events, or being disabled and then having that disability advance where maybe you need more support, where you were not high support needs and now you're high support needs. Dementia or changes in cognitive impairment, things of that nature. And honestly, the grief of watching things happening on a collective level, watching genocide advance to the current stage. At time of filming, we're watching manufactured famine because there's plenty of food in the world and it's being withheld. And it's not only just happening in Gaza, it has happened before. And it's part of why we're able to recognize that it's in fact happening. There's a grief there, especially with the feeling of hyper normalization where we're watching this on our phones, like you're probably watching or listening to this on your phone right now. And now I'm also thinking about it. I shared it a few days ago in my stories, this sweet young boy who was talking about how, like, I'm about to cry. I cry every time I think about it. Talking about how he was so proud to have grown an eggplant, this little eggplant. And He's so grateful to God for it. No. Okay, I'm going to bring it back. So you see, but I can't talk about that at work. Can't talk about that at work because then we're getting political, or people who aren't keeping up with it feel like we are catastrophizing. Anyway, that has real impact on people. Climate change, climate disaster is also, I feel, a form of disenfranchised grief. It could be very viscerally felt by the people who go through it because they're in the public eye when these situations occur, and then completely falls off the radar because more things happen. It could also be on our end feeling this sense of powerlessness, recognizing that. Like anytime a major hurricane goes and sweeps through Puerto Rico, I feel this like grief and shame, survivor's guilt in a way, where it's like I feel like because I ended up not living there after all, and it didn't happen to me, I feel it's like a responsibility, or this feeling of like if I don't appreciate things enough or value what I have enough, then I'm letting them down. So yeah, there are clearly a lot of different ways it could be showing up. All of them have some degree of guilt, shame, it being undermined in some way, whether it is coming from the outside or it's coming from the inside. So as far as like where you could be receiving that messaging externally, it could be at least it wasn't worse. You should be over it by now. Or even hitting your grief experiences against each other. Like, you didn't react that way when so and so died. That's so pointless to still be stuck on. You can't control anything about whatever that might be going on in the world. So why would you let that ruin your day? Why would you ruminate? I think that's the other kind of like dog whistle for disenfranchised grief or people attempting to minimize your grief. I think that this kind of grief could also be known as like hidden grief because it's going oftentimes unacknowledged or is not validated by our social norms and expectations for what is and is not allowed for grief or deserving of grief. As far as like other cues to look out for, because maybe the incident has already happened and there was a degree of normalization and you do feel like a little bit off, or even if you're resonating and you're like, I'm not really sure how that could be showing up for me, a few things that can be indicators about disenfranchised grief already being at play potentially are a number of emotional factors. There's obviously like the big umbrella of grief, but there's also sadness and anger. Again, guilt is a really, really big one. Emotional numbness. Disenfranchised grief also can then lead to bigger overarching issues that I feel like oftentimes will disguise the underlying cause because we then focus on that thing that is easier for us to pick at. We're thinking about somatic things like insomnia, substance use or misuse, anxiety, depression, not unlike how with people who are neurodivergent, we are often diagnosed with like anxiety and depression first, and then we're like, something still not right with this still not good for some reason, only to find out, oh, ADHD is there. Oh, we have autism. Oh, we have OCD. So oftentimes these things can mask or be the thing that we notice because it's all happening in our heads. Like how with ADHD, there's hyperactivity. We will notice the hyperactivity of like young boy running around. Like that's stereotype. Like little white boy running and being told to stop and he goes, no. And we don't realize how much that hyperactivity could be people assigning something else to it. Like, oh, she's addicted to her phone. She is addicted to TikTok. But it's like, oh, that's where that hyperactivity is showing up. It's in the visual stimulation. It can show up through, I don't like the body keeps score guy, but the body keeps score. Physical symptoms like muscle tension, unexplained pain, GI symptoms are really a big one. Like I can tell whether or not something is going on with me, not necessarily in how I might be feeling, because I'm like, oh, we're veering a certain direction and something is wrong. Self-esteem could also be one that, again, it might kind of need time to incubate before you really notice it. Like people will begin to notice that you're talking down on yourself more, or that you are like taking fewer risks, or you're being less outspoken when normally you do chime in more. Those things maybe. And it could be one that I think ends up being one that people may clock and then bring to your awareness, versus you being like, oh, I feel like my self-esteem is lower. That it could be easier for us to recognize that later on. Things like isolation, feeling like we're not really getting the support that we need from the rituals around us could also be one potentially. Again, it continues to flow and incubate and to grow over time. It bleeds into our relationships. It makes it so we have more trouble focusing. It makes it so we feel like we don't have a sense of like emotional nervous system regulation, mood swings for sure. And all of this can then compound to having more issues around grief, and also feeling a sense of, again, that complicated grief where maybe you are still like deep in it for months after, and it's now making it so you're having trouble processing anything around you. It can reduce your sense of resilience, your sense of processing in the way that works best for you. In a sense, I feel like not getting the support that you need via disenfranchised grief, becoming disenfranchised grief. We replace coping mechanisms, self-regulation techniques, and community care, having open, honest relationships. Yeah, I feel like you end up replacing it with dependent on things that you shut it down, you compartmentalize, which can have its place up to a point. But in the long run, a lot more of our experiences are interwoven than we realize. And by not giving language and time and space to what we have felt, whether it is strictly a physical loss of life, or a loss of relationship, or feeling a sense of like loss of community or even humanity by virtue of kind of naming the genocidal and climate change aspect of it all, where there is this feeling of those people are disenfranchised and watching the disenfranchisement creates more disenfranchised grief. It's really important to have the outlets to explore and to navigate them appropriately. That feeling of, I don't have a right to feel this way, is such a slippery slope, and I think really does bleed into all of the other areas of our life more than we give ourselves credit for. So, you know me, I don't like to just yap about what a thing is. I would like to ideally give you practical to take with you, to try out. So how to navigate it: 1, name it, validate it. Your feelings are real and deserving of attention. And if the thing in question has already happened and some time has gone by, I would recommend kind of what we were talking about before, that looking at the other symptoms in a sense that could be masking the underlying issue, and creating a barrier between you and your ability to really get to the root cause of what is causing the actual issue. I think it's important to seek support from non-judgmental places. So it could be a matter of finding even maybe a new therapist. That's something that I have had to come to terms with, is that I've had plenty of good enough therapists, but it wasn't until I began to get my diagnoses and find therapists that worked for me. I also, hot tip, I did approach my most recent therapeutic relationship with saying from the very beginning, I don't want to begin the first few sessions unpacking all of my past family trauma, all of the Emmy lore. It only serves to traumatize me, and I would rather begin to focus on here and now, current situations, If we need to go back to 5 years ago to help anchor in context, we can do that. If not, it's only hurting me. And that was a few years ago, I think. And I feel like I have felt more comfortable with going back to past situations because I feel like I have more coping skills to go there versus being thrown there and then being like, all right, time's up, and then having to continue working. Like, no. Do not recommend. So I would recommend that, if anything. Maybe if it's a matter of finding a therapist who specializes, like let's say you have lost a partner and they passed and y'all were poly, it could be very, very helpful, even temporarily, to work with a therapist that is specialized for that, because they will be very skilled at recognizing the nuances and differences between how you might be navigating your grief versus somebody who is monogamous or has only maybe briefly explored poly and it never really resulted in the experience that you've had. Civic support groups, if possible, I think could be really lovely. Y'all can let me know how y'all feel about it. I don't know if this could be an all the time thing. Maybe I'll do it on a rolling basis. But if y'all would like me to do a virtual group on disenfranchised grief very broadly and coming with what is your experience, I feel like that could really be beautiful to facilitate. Because, yeah, again, grief is multi-layered. It's many, many things. And we really can't act like it's only you losing your 50-year-old cat. They don't live that long, Emmy. Oh my God. Your 20-year-old cat. and then, yeah, it isn't just that. It's not just losing your mom. It's not just losing your 20-year-old cat. It is all of the experiences that make us human. So let me know if that ends up if that excites you all, if that feels like it would be aligned. We can put something together. I think it's important to align your action with what your spirit needs, what you emotionally need. If it is a matter of either alone or with a friend, or even I'm very big on the body doubling virtually. So shout out to my bestie, Natasha. I'll be like, I have to build a bookcase. Can you be with me virtually while I take that on? Because I need help. And then, yeah, I'll do my thing. She'll do her thing. And a lot of feelings came up with doing that I think I only really could have gone there if I had that connection. So absolutely do it that way, do it virtually, have somebody there, but boxing up an ex's possessions either after a breakup or if you need to condense down their things if they passed, then I think working with somebody could be helpful because it can go either way. Sometimes we hoard things that only end up hurting us. Sometimes we go the opposite direction and we throw away everything, and then we have a lot of regret with no longer having physical things that anchor us to that connection. Writing a letter to say goodbye or to acknowledge the things that were felt or were left unsaid, planting a tree or some other thing in their honor. It could be a tree, it could be like a shrub, it could be if they love mint or lavender, if they were a lilac person, go plant a lilac bush and then I'll be jealous because you have lilac and I don't. Make a collage of photographs, mementos. That could be a great way of, if you have a lot of photos or like paper goods from your time connected to each other, that could be great when you know you're a doom pile person. Having something that you can then frame and like that's the dedicated visual altar to that person, to that relationship. Holding your own memorial in some way that could hold a significance. So I did that for somebody recently, somebody that I did not meet personally, but I am connected with this person's sister. And they're like my sibling passed, and I am traveling, and I'm like, let me know what you need, whether it's that you would like for me to come with you, if you want to just have me hop on a call and we can chat, or if you'd prefer something else, let me know. We'll figure it out. And they said, do you have an altar of your own? Because I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to have very little of my things. I'm not going to be able to build an altar. I want to be able to build a memorial altar, to do some kind of ritual to send them away on my own terms in the way that would make sense for me and my spirituality. Can you do that? So I said, absolutely. We talked about a few different things about what would feel right for them based on what they do and they believe and what I have available to me and what I believe in, what I subscribe to. And we landed on a memorial. I asked what music do they like? What do they enjoy? What was their like energy? So then I could make sure that I was like picking a few other things that could help to solidify the ritual. And I gave them updates as I went along, and I let them know like, oh, I'm playing this song for them. I'm doing this. I wrote up a little few words to say that felt like them based on what you have relayed to me. And they were deeply, deeply touched by that. So whether it's that you outsource it to somebody to some extent, or you're collaborating with them on it, or even if it comes down to maybe we bounce ideas and then you go and do the ritual in question. All of the above, you can either work with on a spiritual practitioner or with a death doula or someone like me where I intersect those identities. Dedicate an activity to them. So it could be hiking, especially if the activity in question that y'all like, especially dedicate an activity to them, especially if it's one that y'all were very much like aligned with. I think what can be the most helpful with disenfranchised grief, if you feel like you don't really have a lot of people you can go to, if it feels complicated, then allow yourself to return to it as you need to. Set boundaries as you need to. When you're recognizing that people are minimizing your experience, journal, create art, listen to music, make a playlist that was like y'all's thing, and just let yourself talk out loud to them, in your car. Educate other people who are receptive. I think if they're not strictly being dismissive and they're just like, I just don't understand, but if you told me, I would get it. If you do have people who are in that more neutral area, then be very clear and open with them. Like, hey, it feels really diminishing when you told me that this person shouldn't be causing me this reaction or shouldn't be making me feel this way. If you can possibly get to a point where you're able to communicate together about it, I think that could both heal y'all's dynamic. It's a gift to them, it's a gift to you. And as a note to people who maybe are watching this and feeling like, oh, snap, I did that to somebody, or I am doing that to somebody. I think an important thing, if you've done that before or if you're doing it now, there's always time to have that accountability moment and say, hey, I'm sorry, I was out of pocket. I just even acknowledge, I just don't get it. And it's up to me to figure it out. I may need to lean on you in a few areas for us to be able to help me get it, but I understand that I don't want this to become your work. That's the thing. Don't go and apologize and then be like, okay, now it's your job to make me better. We're not going to do that. But we are going to try to be collaborative in it going forward. Obviously, there will be work that you do. There will be work that they do. We have to try to meet in the middle. I think it's important to make sure that we're listening, meeting people where they are, listening before reacting, checking ourselves when maybe we are being quick to respond, really thinking about, am I only doing what I feel like doing because it's convenient for me? Am I actually like disregarding what they actually need? We could be acting out of our own preconceived notions about what is the proper thing, and also our preconceived notions about what is and is not okay to grieve about, or even that we shouldn't be grieving that long. When we perpetuate this, we're perpetuating the disenfranchised grief, and we're enabling that divide between the grieving person, and then they're internalizing that I can't trust you. That could be a tough one to come back from, but if you're willing to put in the work, then nothing is impossible in my mind, unless, of course, they're really, really done with you. And, that sucks, but take that as the lesson that you needed and do better in the future. That's the best any of us can do. So, What did we learn here today? We learned a lot. We learned a lot about Emmy. That's always fun. But yeah, give yourself permission to grieve in your own way, in your own time. All grief is valid. Grief is often intersecting. Continue to practice the self care routines that nourish your mental, emotional, physical bodies. Our bodies may inform us more about where we are with our grief than our mental and emotional state. So be in tune with that as well. Don't be quick to write it off as the underlying reason is emotional mental just because we happen to have an upset tummy. Maybe our feelings are creating the hurty tummy. Recognize and acknowledge that there is a cyclical nature to grief. There is no set timeline. And, really meet people where they are and who they actually are and not who we want them to be and how we want them to be acting. I would encourage you all to support each other in ways that may not even be fully visible. It could be as simple as just like being more present. Have you experienced this kind of grief? I imagine you have. How did you cope? I am also open to holding space for if you've done it yourself. Let me know what that kind of looked like for you. And I'd be happy to offer a little bit of POV for y'all as far as like how to maybe turn that around and to be more available to the people that maybe you unintentionally hurt. I'm happy to be here for you all. Thank you all for watching. Thanks again to my patrons for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.